Hello dear viewers, you are watching Ruslan Belov's channel. Today we will analyze the situation in Ukraine as of August 27, 2025. A lot of truly exciting events have happened today, so let's get straight to it. We begin our video analysis today with the Kherson section of the front line. Let me remind you that just yesterday, initial reports emerged suggesting that Russian forces are striving to achieve absolute fire dominance over the M14 highway. This highway connects the cities of Mykolaiv and Kherson. In connection with this, we discussed yesterday a new concept within the framework of the special military operation: the kill zone, or zone of destruction. Let me also remind you that yesterday, pro-Ukrainian sources released this video, where we can see an unfinished grid, and a vehicle is moving along the M14 highway from Mykolaiv toward Kherson. During its movement, at least 2 vehicles were reported to have been damaged by Russian FPV drone attacks. Today, the situation on the M14 highway has developed further. We've updated our maps, adding a small black area that essentially represents the kill zone. In the future, we will likely designate similar areas where entering practically guarantees damage or injury upon exit. So today, new footage has been released, again from the M14 highway. Once more, a vehicle is seen moving. It's worth noting that yesterday, 2 damaged or destroyed vehicles were recorded on this highway. Today, those damaged vehicles were cleared, but in their place, several more, 4 to be precise, appeared. It seems that, upon closer inspection, there are also a few damaged vehicles in the oncoming traffic lane. In summary, based on objective control footage, over the past 2 days, at least 6 damaged or destroyed vehicles have been recorded. According to Russian sources, these vehicles were used by the Ukrainian armed forces, possibly for transporting cargo or military personnel between Mykolaiv and Kherson. Of course, we will await additional information from this section. But overall, a clearer picture is emerging. Russian forces are beginning preparations for the Kherson direction ahead of a potential crossing of the Dnipro River and a possible advance on the city. For now, this preparation is primarily focused on achieving complete dominance over the M14 highway. It has become nearly impossible to move anything between the 2 cities without sustaining damage. We will continue to monitor how the situation develops. Let me remind you that Russia will achieve maximum dominance over Kherson if it successfully crosses the Dnipro River and establishes control over the Ostrov district, located in the southern part of the city. Next, we move to the Zaporizhzhia section of the front, where attacks by the Russian armed forces continue. Over the past 24 hours, several significant videos have been recorded. The first comes from the area of the city of Novotroitsk. In these recordings, we can see how the Russian armed forces, during reconnaissance operations, identify the positions and temporary deployment point of the 65th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. This brigade serves as a key stronghold and the backbone of Ukraine's defense in the Zaporizhzhia sector, between the cities of Orikhiv and Stepnohirsk. In these videos, we observe Russian forces effectively destroying this stronghold and temporary deployment point, resulting in significant losses for the Ukrainian armed forces. Most notably, these losses include operators of FPV drones. If the name 65th Mechanized Brigade doesn't ring a bell, let's recall events from, say, August 1, 2025. We can remember the attacks carried out by the 65th Brigade on trains moving through the Tokmak area, transporting fuel and possibly ammunition from mainland Russia toward Crimea. Ukrainian units from this brigade, particularly FPV drone operators, destroyed trains, causing serious damage to the logistics and units of the Russian armed forces. Let me also remind you that Russian forces are actively advancing in the Zaporizhzhia sector. Battles are ongoing for the city of Stepnohirsk. Today, reports indicate that Russian forces have firmly established themselves in the southern and southwestern parts of the city. Additional clarifications may follow soon. The next video shows FAB, high explosive aerial bomb, strikes directly on the city of Orikhiv. These strikes are likely not related to the start of a potential offensive. It appears they are targeting temporary deployment points, primarily FPV drone operators, and possibly storage facilities or equipment. Next, we move to the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, or the western Donetsk section of the front, where clashes continue for a group of small villages located between the cities of Velika, Novosilka, Komar, Pokrovsk, and Huliaipol. Here, Russian forces are advancing along a broad front, led by the East Troop Grouping. Today, several videos were released showing Russian units using Mangal tanks, turtle tanks, and armored tanks to push as deeply as possible into territories controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are striking these tanks with drones. We saw in these videos that possibly a dozen drones were used against Russian equipment. Despite this, the equipment sustained no damage and simply paused to allow troops to disembark. Russian forces are also encircling the city of Kamyshevka. Today, some pro-Russian analysts indicated that Russian forces have begun storming this city. So far, no geolocated evidence confirming the start of the assault has been provided. However, we believe that the East Troop Grouping will soon confirm this information, possibly with additional footage showing how the battles for this territory unfolded. Russian forces have also created a small kill zone in the area of the city of Ternov. We just saw multiple instances of drones being used to destroy Russian equipment and temporary deployment points in this sector. Meanwhile, after a brief regrouping, the Ukrainian side has resumed offensive operations in the western Donetsk region, around the city of Zeleny High. Today, some neutral cartographers confirmed that the city has been fully cleared by the Ukrainian armed forces. Based on reports from these neutral cartographers, corresponding notations have been made. Zeleny High is now either partially controlled by the Ukrainian side, with the remaining areas covered by the fog of war, or in a grey zone. At the same time, Russian forces continue to carry out airstrikes with guided bombs on Ukrainian armed forces positions and areas of concentration south of Novopavlivka, along the route toward the city of Filia. Let me remind you that yesterday, some analysts reported that the Ukrainian side managed to assemble units in this sector and counterattack Russian positions near Filia. Some analysts suggest that as a result of these counterattacks, Russian forces were forced to retreat to the Russian bank of the Vovcha and Mokra Yala rivers. This means Filia may now be in a grey zone, or Russian forces may control the forested area to the south. For now, we are not updating the map, awaiting additional clarifications or more reliable information to make the appropriate notations. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk sector, where a lot of intriguing information is coming in today. We'll start with the western Pokrovsk direction, where clashes continue along the railway for cities like Udakne and Kotlino. Today, there are significant updates to discuss in detail. Let's begin with Udakne. This morning, several videos were released showing Russian units using FPV drones to strike Ukrainian armed forces positions in the western part of the city. Based on these videos, we initially concluded this morning that the northwestern part of the city might still be under Ukrainian control. Later, footage emerged showing Ukrainian drones striking Russian assault troops advancing in the same northwestern part. Based on these videos, we made a small corresponding notation. However, just before preparing this material, some relatively reliable pro-Russian sources reported that Udakne has fully come under the control of the Russian armed forces. The northwestern, central and southern parts, as well as the farms along the Miska Gully. Moreover, today, some pro-Russian analysts noted that Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups managed to covertly infiltrate the north and northwest, effectively bypassing the Pokrovsk mine, a critical component of Ukraine's defense strategy in this sector. Based on this information, Russian forces have successfully established a reliable bridgehead northwest of the Pokrovsk mine. As a result, Russian saboteurs have completely isolated the Pokrovsk mine from any external support that the Ukrainian armed forces might have received. The Pokrovsk mine is now fully surrounded, essentially in a cauldron. Based on this, we assume that in the near future, Russian units, after clearing the northern part of Udakne, will begin assault operations toward the mine. If the Ukrainian side loses control of this mine, Russian forces will gain control of a significant industrial complex with buildings and underground structures. This would allow them to deploy a large amount of communication equipment in the near future, which would enhance the tactical capabilities of Russian armed forces' FPV drone operators. Control over the Pokrovsk mine would effectively enable Russian forces to establish complete fire dominance over the M30 highway and the Euro 525 road, which runs from Kherson toward the Pokrovsk agglomeration. The loss of the Pokrovsk mine significantly increases the likelihood that the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration will fall into a full operational encirclement, possibly even forming a cauldron. Losses would be extremely high, drones would control virtually everything, and all movement might come to a halt. Additionally, reports indicate that Russian units have fully cleared the city of Kotlino. This information has been confirmed by pro-Ukrainian mapping services. We've covered the western direction and the offensive on Pokrovsk, so now let's move to events in the city of Pokrovsk itself, where a lot of news is coming in. Today, according to a statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense, the settlement of Pokrovsk, or Leontovichi as it is called under the new Ukrainian name, has come fully under the control of Russian armed forces. Based on this Ministry of Defense report, cartographers have updated their maps, marking the corresponding changes. We've highlighted these areas on the map today, relying on official data. For comparison, let's look at how the map looked yesterday. Most of these zones were already considered either contested or in the so-called fog of war, as there were prior reports of combat and Russian control over these territories. However, only today has this information received more substantial official confirmation. Additionally, today, intriguing geolocation data emerged from the southern part of Pokrovsk. I'd like to draw your attention to this footage and discuss it in more detail. The video shows a counterattack carried out by the 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. In the footage, we see a tank sent to the southern part of Pokrovsk, where it fired at a 9-story building from close range. After a series of hits, part of the building collapsed. The Ukrainian tank then attempted to leave the combat zone. This footage suggests that the tank wasn't firing randomly. Most likely the strikes targeted Russian assault groups holding the high-rise. Based on this video, many cartographers updated their maps, marking the corresponding areas. Let's also compare how the map has changed compared to the previous day. Yesterday, a significant portion of these zones was already considered grey, or contested territory. This was due to reported advances by sabotage and reconnaissance groups and numerous reports of combat. Today, new notations appeared on the maps. The entire southern part of Pokrovsk, as well as the area around the building targeted by the Ukrainian tank, were marked. Speaking of the tank itself, this case vividly illustrates what a kill zone, or zone of death, is, which both Ukrainian and Russian forces are trying to establish during offensive operations. The tank was sent into battle. Note its barrel and camouflage. It looks almost gleaming, as if fresh off the assembly line, clean and lubricated. It arrived at the front line, fired on the high-rise, possibly expending part of its ammunition, and then attempted to leave the southern part of Pokrovsk. However, the problem is that Russian forces have long established a kill zone in this area. The footage shows the tank trying to retreat to the northern part of the city, but it is pursued by Russian FPV drones. After several strikes, the third, then the fourth, the tank was destroyed. This happened just north of the line of contact. It appears the tank survived on the battlefield for no more than 10-15 minutes, possibly half an hour at most. This is the reality of combat in Pokrovsk. Daytime movements, especially with equipment, are practically equivalent to destruction. Infantry takes cover in buildings, possibly waiting for nightfall to regroup, move, or evacuate the wounded. Strikes continue in the southern part of the city. Another video from Objective Control shows a strike on a temporary deployment point of the same 155th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Based on this footage, the brigade is suffering significant losses, and there's a high likelihood that it will lose combat effectiveness in the coming days. This could be a turning point in the battles for the southern part of Pokrovsk. Either the brigade will be quickly replaced, or, due to rotation issues, Russian forces may break through the defense, and the southern part of the city could come under their control. Now let's move to the northeastern direction. Some cartographers note slight advances by Russian forces near the settlement of Rodinska. Corresponding changes have been made to the maps based on these reports. Progress is slow but present. Ukrainian defenses are gradually being worn down, though fighting is still occurring in areas with low-rise buildings. Russian forces likely haven't reached the city center yet. The fiercest battles are expected in the high-rise district. After this area, the defense of the Pokrovsk agglomeration will likely collapse. By then, a potential breakthrough in the west, near the Pokrovska mine, could occur. If these two directions converge, the so-called Pokrovsk cauldron could form. Next, let's consider the breakthrough zone. Let me remind you that about 20 days ago, Russian forces achieved a breakthrough, but the Ukrainian side appears to have partially stabilized the situation. Russian forces are now consolidating their positions. The main Ukrainian defensive line was breached. While Ukrainian forces may have stabilized the front, the current map configuration allows Russian units to more confidently clear the Shakivski pocket, where fighting continues. According to various cartographers, over the past 24 hours, Russian forces slightly improved their positions, approaching the settlement of Sofiivka. Today, the distance from their forward positions to Sofiivka is just 1,360 meters. In the coming days, possibly within a week or 10 days, Russian forces may enter Sofiivka. If this happens, the Shakivski pocket will be fully surrounded, leading to a cauldron. Evacuation would then begin, potentially mirroring the scenario of the battles for Kurakov in the Uspanivsky pocket. The situation in Shakov is similar. Russian forces surrounded and fragmented Ukrainian positions, leading to heavy losses and retreat. This may repeat here. Next, we move to Constantinovka, where the fiercest battles are ongoing for the southern and southeastern parts. Today, Russian units released footage from Katerynovka. In this footage, 2 Russian soldiers raise a flag in the center of the settlement. These videos don't warrant map changes, but confirm the Russian Ministry of Defense's report of full control over Katerynovka. According to the Ministry of Defense, Klebenberg is also under Russian control. However, some sources linked to units on the ground report that the clearing of this settlement is still ongoing, and control is not complete. Meanwhile, Russian forces have begun clearing Ukrainian positions further north along the railway. Artillery and FPV drone operators are active. Konstantinovka is being prepared for an assault, which appears imminent. In the Siversk sector, an artillery duel continues. Russian forces are preparing the Siversky Donetsk and Zherebets rivers, located north of Siversk, for an offensive and crossing. Russian forces have approached a dense section of the Serebryanska forestry, the so-called gut, or pocket, through which they plan to cross the Siversky Donetsk to reach Dronivka and Siversk from the north. An offensive on Yampol is also expected from these positions. Artillery is actively working, identifying positions, especially Ukrainian drone control points, which are being targeted. Progress is minimal but present. Further north, the situation for Ukrainian forces is even more challenging. It appears that the northeastern flank of Lyman's defense collapsed today. Some cartographers, including pro-Ukrainian sources, have adjusted their maps, noting that Kolodezi is almost entirely under Russian control. Pro-Russian analysts report that Russian forces have begun advancing south of Kolodezi toward the next strongholds. Based on the direction, the goal appears to be an attack on Zaporizhzhia from the northwest. The attack is coming from a direction where Ukrainian forces least expect it. Reports today also indicate Russian advances in Zaporizhzhia itself. Some map adjustments are based on pro-Ukrainian sources, which have marked parts of Zaporizhzhia as Russian-controlled, with much of the settlement considered a grey zone or contested territory. This suggests that fighting is occurring across roughly 80% of Zaporizhzhia. If the settlement falls, battles for Yampol and Lyman will soon follow. There is also footage confirming Russian advances. Videos show assault troops moving through Zaporizhzhia under Ukrainian FPV drone strikes. One episode was filmed at a specific location, based on which map notations were made. In the near future, the Russian Ministry of Defense will likely report the capture of Zaporizhzhia, after which battles for Lyman will begin automatically. There are no changes in the northern Kupiansk direction. Crossings are fully under control. Ukrainian forces have lost communication between the western and eastern parts of the Kupiansk agglomeration. Losses are enormous, and there's a likelihood that Ukrainian forces will begin retreating from eastern Kupiansk, possibly without resistance. In the Sumy sector, the situation is stable. Fighting continues. The North Troop Grouping reports daily advances in Yunakivka. Based on this data, Yunakivka may soon come fully under Russian control. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe, like, and see you next time.